Hi guys, it's Sam here from Egg Seeds, and you've joined me outside in my garden today because it's too bright to be indoors, and I thought I'd share with you what to do when your tomatoes are big enough to pot on or getting a bit too leggy. Now tomatoes are a fantastic plant because actually anywhere along their stem they can actually form roots. So if we bury this stem into the ground, it will start forming roots on the outside of it. We've got a couple of different ways we could do this. So we could use one of the Jiffy 7 bags. I did another video on these just to show you how these work. But these basically expand up to this. I can make a hole in it and then bury the tomato all the way down. Now that's okay, except I've still got a lot of tomato above the surface. And what I really want to do is bury it as high up as I can, so the more roots are on that little plant, the quicker it's going to absorb those nutrients and that water from the soil and compost, and the quicker it's going to grow onto the bigger plant. So every time I pot on tomatoes, I want to sink their stem further into the ground. I could use one of the paper pots. It's slightly larger than the Jiffy 7 bag. I could pot them on into these plastic pots that I've got lots of. But you notice there's a big space in here, which will mean it'll take a lot of compost, and this plant doesn't need that much around it just yet. I need those roots to develop more, and then I might pot on into this as a next stage, just to get those plants further into the compost so they form more roots and therefore bigger, faster plants. So I'm not going to use them today. I could make lots of these, but you see I've got a lot of plants here and I've got a lot more seeds starting off. So I'm going to go for something a bit quicker and a bit easier to manage. In the video I made about the Jiffy 7 stuff, I also made a video about the coconut flour or coconut fibres that you can get from places such as a hydroponic store, garden centres, or even Lidl's been selling this packet. Now this packet has gone from 1 litre up to 10 litres of material just by adding some water into it. It's expanded and absorbed, and this will help keep moisture around those roots. This one has also been fed with fertiliser by the store, and that's going to be quite good to get these tomatoes really boosted up. Now all I need is a container. So one of my recycled containers, my mushroom container, I'm going to fill this up and I'm going to plant those tomatoes in. I don't need to overfill it because as I make the holes for the tomatoes I'll just be pushing more of it onto the side, and why waste it? This is another great way of reusing something else when you don't have compost. You can use coconut fibre, but what you do need to remember is it doesn't provide really nourishment for those roots or those plants. All it provides is structure for holding that moisture around their roots and for them to start establishing. So you do generally have to start feeding those seedlings once they start producing their second set of leaves or third set of leaves. So that's why you might use something like a soluble plant feed or a liquid fertiliser. You can have organic ones as well. You might use your own comfy liquid or nettle tea or weed teas. There's many aerobic tea sort of ideas of what you can do online. But for this one, it's already pre-fed, so I'm going to get on.
So what I'm doing here is I'm having a look at the tomato seedlings, working out where the division between the two varieties are, where the roots are likely to be. And I'm going to use the trusted ruler just to help separate the soil there, easing it apart gently. I'll get my hands in there and lift it up with the ruler, just so I can put it away in the block. So when I'm handling this block of soil, I'm making sure I'm not holding any of the tomato seedlings by the stem. If I do need to hold them, I'll do it from underneath the soil or by the leaves.
So I brought the trusty ruler out to show you that this plant pot is about 7 centimetres deep. And if I just prise one of these seedlings away, just by holding it by the leaves and gently pulling it up, let's swap hands. You can see the entire plant here is only 7 centimetres. So I've got a good depth here to sink it down to probably about 5 in there, and then I'll move on to the next. So I'm making a hole with a pencil. I'll use the pencil to push the roots in so they don't stick to my finger. Push them down. And that's all I'm going to do. I can push the compost back in around it, or I can use the water that I'm going to water it afterwards to do that. Because it's already quite saturated, I'm going to do it with a pencil. Just going to make sure. So next, I'm going to use my fingers, gently wiggling. Bigger hole, more compost. Get those roots right down. I'm not pushing on the stem because I don't want to damage the stem. I'm not picking it up by the stem because I don't want to bruise it and damage it there as well. So just by the leaves. What we've got to remember as well, these are our cherry tomato seeds that we saved from those fridge cherry tomatoes. I've left these plants on a windowsill, so what you've noticed is they've gone a bit leggy and they've leant over to one side. I did rotate that pot around, so I tried to encourage them to keep growing back and centralising themselves, get them straight again. But what you note is if you've got them in too warm a place and the sun moves across that window and it's too dark for too much of the day, they will search for that light. Now that makes them quite leggy. So there's a few ways in which we can bring them back down to being less leggy. One is to bury those stems and get them to form roots. Another one is to sort of be brushing over them, trying to strengthen them up, just gently, keep them like that so they form stronger sort of stems to take that wind. Another one is a low wind setting. We get a fan on them so it's blowing air through them, and that encourages them to strengthen up as if they were going outside and fighting against the wind. They want to make themselves strong. It will slow their height growth down a little bit to make them stronger at the roots. Same as trees. You find a tree in a windy location, you generally find it's a shorter tree, it's had stunted growth because it's trying to make itself strong to withstand the winds and the other forces at play in that location. So same with the plants, a gentle breeze through them will stunt their upward growth, strengthen them up, and that will stop them from going so leggy as well. The other one, you can always control the temperature in the room, but I'm trying to germinate lots of seeds, so I was quite happy to have it quite high temperature. You may wonder, did I do anything to this compost before I started doing this? I just made sure it stayed nice and moist. Therefore it's easier for the roots to come away and they're less likely to get any damage or tearing at the roots when I give them a gentle sort of pull. Another tip whilst doing this is to make sure you've washed your hands before you do it. Otherwise you might have oils or water on there and you might find the leaves or the stems will stick to you. So that's the first set of tomatoes planted on. So that's the cherry tomatoes. I'm going to make sure the label goes up to the point in which they stop. So now we're going to move on to the money makers. That's one of the lovely things about making the videos outside, is you get to hear the birds tweeting away and get to see nature. I don't know if you've noticed, but it looks like obviously the larger the tomato, the same time period, you notice it's actually 2 centimeters bigger. And that's because the moneymaker is a large tomato variety and it grows a big vine. Generally I find the cherry tomatoes don't grow as fast or as tall. You might wonder why I left that big clump around the roots of that plant. My theory is, if I don't need to disturb the roots, why bother? Because they're already starting to form bacterial connections with the soil, which is how they transfer certain nutrients between themselves. So if I can keep a little bit of soil around the roots, that's just as even important than getting the plant in there as deep as I can. Now that's fantastic. I managed to get all of them potted onto a slightly larger tray. I'm not too worried about the spacing because I want them to form a few more leaves and are slightly taller before I give them a bigger sized pot. So all I'll need to do is give that a good water in a day or two before it dries out, just to encourage them to grow. What I don't want to do is soak the top of the leaves and leave them wet. That will just encourage fungus and fungal problems and encourage the stems to rot and the plants to die. So what I might end up doing is drilling a few holes or putting a few holes in the bottom and putting this in a tray in which I can soak on.
So here's those tomato transplants just a few days on underneath a artificial light, and you can see how they're doing really well and nice and strong growth.